1, I'll call a common council meeting to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Iverson.
Here.
Schatzinger.
Here.
Reamer.
Here.
Gallops.
Here.
Denkert.
Here.
Kotsky.
Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in the land. Extol the Lord our God. Worship at his footstool. Holy is he. We pray. Good, gracious community, we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved. No one has signed up for public comment tonight. So moving to the first agenda, 7th, for the annual Dickens of a Christmas on the 100 through 400 blocks of Watson Street. Looking for a closure between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. on the 6th.
I'll second.
Motion by Jonathan, seconded by John. Discussion.
You know there's a representative here, Mayor. Mandy, would you like to say anything about Dickens or what's briefly?
Incredible to think that this is the 34th year that this tradition has happened. I often tell people it's the reason I fell in love with Ripon when I first moved here, and so I'm grateful for the chance to keep it going. We've seen a lot of growth since it took, and we are working together with our chief of police to make sure that safety is, the top concern there. As for some reason with this parade more than others, people tend to pour out into the street and not stay back on the curb, and so businesses that are investing in this event, it's kind of like a rite of passage to be in a living window. There's a fire and LED light show following the parade, and so this will be the second year that our fire department has received all of those permits, and it'll just be more enjoyable for people. Our fire department helps with our burn barrels. It's just a whole process. The tour of homes has 6 amazing homes, some additional buildings that will be open. And so I think there's a lot of excitement for this one, but it does look like it's going to be pretty cold. We're planning for what it's like if there is snow on the ground. There's a 5K in the morning that the Parks and Recs Department will be doing for the second year in a row called Run Santa Run. And so it really is.
Thanks so much, Mandy. Great overview and excited for it myself. This next question I don't want to ask, but because of the world we live in, I need to. What are the plans to think about blocking off with some, for safety reasons, some entryways for vehicles? I know in the past you've had sort of larger trucks. Mm-hmm. Is that going to happen again this year?
Yeah, so I think the plan is to keep using vehicles as really important roadblocks, and so Chief Wellner has really kind of down, and so kind of knowing which are the points that are the most important to have, the ambulance just sitting right there, and so that serves as a great natural barrier, but it's something we're always looking and addressing, and until we can really afford the really expensive by parking, emergency vehicles there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions for Mandy? Thank you, Mandy. Any further discussion? Aye. Opposed? That is approved. Next item is street light LED retrofit project approval. Alan, would you like to give a background on the project?
Good evening, everyone. Last year, the city was awarded a grant through the carbon reduction grant program of approximately a little bit more than 40,000 with various electrical contractors in the community to secure quotes. I did get 3 quotes. I sent out requests for quotes to a 4th, and they did not respond. The update or edit the recommended actions for bullet points number 2 and 3. I failed to point out who I was recommending to award those to, and that would be to Heatley Electric. So I apologize for that. But in the end, for the city for years, each taking one half of the community. And so they're more familiar with I guess, the nature in which the streetlights are wired, the circuitry, things like that. So they ended up submitting the most advantageous quotes on a per fixture basis. So with that,
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, thank you for telling us who you recommend, but subcontract out to Ripon Electric? Or are they going to do those, or?
no, so based on the spreadsheet that I prepared for you, Ripon Electric provided the $40 per unit. Heatley Electric provided the most advantageous quotes for Hilltop, South Douglas, Stanton, and Buyer Street, and then the handful of lights that are in Hilltop, Hermine, Wilkes, and Sunrise Drive. The retrofitting the streetlights on West Fond du Lac and Union to Ripon Electric.
Okay,
And then by inserting Heatley Electric into points 2 and 3.
okay. Okay, that helps me.
The city will be direct purchasing all of the fixtures through the state's approved vendors. And there's about 100 compared to Modro's. There are some for doing all of them throughout the community. It was 21.5.
Thank you.
Mark?
What's the expected lifespan of the LED lights?
I don't have that information. I know it's in the tens of thousands of hours.
Okay. And I don't know if anyone else is aware, but there was a rash or there was a manufacturer defect on a lot of them that made that purple glow, if you've been down to Milwaukee or anything. I hate the purple. I have read that that is no longer an issue, so I'm assuming that these manufacturers have addressed that particular failure mode.
That was one particular manufacturer, and it had to do with an internal part that was failing.
I move that we accept the recommended project, let's see, how should I say it? Streetlight LED retrofit project approval for retrofitting Fond du Lac, West Fond du Lac and Union Street to Ripon Electric.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ellen, seconded by Mark. Jolene?
A quick question about the actual fixtures. So some of them just say the fixture heads, and then Hilltop says decorative fixtures. So are those going to be different?
They are different than the standard fixtures that you see going up, say like, I guess, jargon in the electrical industry. There are 7 of them in that residential area that are more decorative fixture, and I think I provided a photograph.
Looking for guidance on those, or you'll make that decision?
We will make that decision with the contractor. There'll be Heatley Electric assisting me with that decision.
I appreciate they have covers on. On a side note, I've been reading about light pollution and how the covers.
Any further discussion? All right, thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Install them. And the state's paying for 80% of the LED lights. Do I understand that right?
Believe so, Alan?
We will pay the full fixture price up front, and then I'll submit the reimbursement.
Purchase cost of the fixture.
Correct.
At 80%.
80%, so we'll get 80%.
We pay the labor.
back. Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. All those in favor of approving the streetlight LED retrofit project with West Fond du Lac and Union Street going to Ripon Electric and the balance going to Heatley Electric, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Next item is a resolution for tax incremental district number 6, affordable housing.
For affordable housing, so this is a common practice that the city has done over the last few years. anytime we have an eligible TIF district to close, we extend it 1 year and take that increment for, of housing options, affordable housing and land acquisition, subdivision development program, projects identified in any housing study. So that's kind of the common language we've been using in the resolution. We anticipate approximately 397 upon this resolution passing and termination of TID 6. This is the TID that is on the west side of town. It is our largest active TIF district, and
I move that we accept resolution tax incremental district TID number 6 affordable housing extension.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Ellen, seconded by John. Discussion?
Take a roll call.
One last time, is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Benkert.
Yes.
Gatsky.
Yes.
Sorensen.
Yes.
Yes.
Carries.
Thank you. Next item is, it's sister resolution here, a resolution for tax increment district number 6 termination. And with this termination, the city would fall below the 12% value threshold to open a new TID. Ellen.
I move that we accept resolution for tax incremental district number 6.
It has to be closed at
Strike
the late.
that.
On or before April 15, 2023.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. And I'd also we need a second, and then I wanted to follow up.
I'll second.
So motion by Ellen, second by Mark. Ellen?
This fall below that 12% TID threshold. You really don't want to be above that 12% TID threshold. So this allows us to create another TID in the future if it's needed.
So, and this, just to be clear too, recommended it be closed. It will allow us to, like Alan said, get under the 12%. We have obligations to create new TIF districts. So once this one, effective essentially tonight, goes through, if you approve it, we can begin creating a new TIF district.
If there is no more discussion, motion is to, for the resolution for tax increment district number 6 termination on or before April 15th, 2025.
Reamer.
Yes.
Gallops.
Yes.
Benkert.
Yes.
Gatsky.
Yes.
Sorensen.
Yes.
Split.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on, we have a discussion with the shared ride taxi service. We have Justin running here from
I was gonna just do a quick presentation. Justin is on the line as well, and I think we can kind of go through what I had prepared, and then Justin, if you want to jump in, or if we want to kind of just over the last couple months, we've been talking about the shared ride taxi service within the city, mostly through the budget, and the service is very valuable and is run extremely well. This is a product of finance. It is a product of city budgeting and a product of, frankly, state aid to the city. Us making any decisions regarding the service tonight. This is mostly informational. Any sort of big changes to the service would require a public hearing. So for fees or anything Wisconsin, and we've had a long-standing contract and partnership with them to provide the service. Really in absence of a private taxi service in rural areas because of affordability and income and et cetera, right? These are very popular in communities and provide transportation for elderly, disabled, school children, et cetera, anybody, right? So, you know, the reason why generally we do not see private taxi services in communities like ours is because it's just not economically feasible, okay? So we have a we, as the city, are responsible for determining how the operation is run, so fares and hours, service area, et cetera, every 5 years. So we are coming up on a procurement in the next year or two. And then really the services are funded by the Federal Transportation Administration, State of Wisconsin, the City of Ripon, and through the riders, through fares. So really it really is reliant. It's governed under Section 5311. That's the technical grant that we receive. And then State Statute 8520 is where you get the Mass Transit Operating Assistant Program. So, I think some of the actions we have taken in about 2 years ago, we raised rates in hopes that some financial, there'd be a bit of a turnaround or help with some of the deficit. But we continue to see all from reporting that we are required to do. So quarterly, I have to log into a system that updates all of the information, and the state then basically provides reports to us and makes sure there's oversight. Over the last, since 2018, you can see the total number of trips, right? And you can see that pre-COVID, we were at around 38,000 rides per year. We have not COVID. So there's been about on average, about 9 to 10,000 per ride or per trip decline over the last couple of years. Even during COVID, the numbers were very strong. But in terms of service hours, when we bid the contract, we have traditionally gone with 13,314 hours. That's how many hours of service we anticipate running the taxi every year. As you can see, we have remained pretty close to that. And our more normal years, under COVID years, we did drop that a little bit. I will note also that during the COVID period, the state did provide additional COVID dollars to operate, and that did help with some of the deficits during those periods. So when it comes down to, just general numbers of trips per hour, 2.9 pre-COVID down to about 2.5. And, that matters mostly from a fare revenue perspective, right? The state also, sorry for this, is a lot of information, but I wanted to give you a taste what, other communities are dealing with or what they're seeing in terms of their ridership, and just compare us to, our peers, because we are not the only service that is operating in the state like this, and we certainly aren't the only service struggling to operate this service, okay? So you can see here that we, on an average are about 2.61 trips per hour. And you can just see where our peer groups are and per hour at 2.61 or 2.5. That's still better than a number, obviously less than others. Okay. When you look at how this operates, when we are billed X amount of dollars, right? And through procurement, we kind of see a jump. So I believe in 2021, 2022, before that, we saw minimal increases. What happens is you're allowed to increase it based on cost of living. So the state allows you to do minor increases, but where you see a lot of the jumps is when you do procurement. And you can see though that over the last few years, our costs per hour to operate have increased, a decent amount. And that just certainly, when your ridership is down, your revenue is down, but your costs are up and your hours are remaining the same, you can kind of see why financially it is getting bigger, okay? So those costs are all, yep.
Can you remind me, so is that negotiated every 5 years or every year?
It's negotiated, it's an RFP every 5 years. So what happens is the first year you enter a contract, it's a rate. The second year, you basically freeze it in. But then after that, it is 5 years. So you're not trading, out contractors, because stability is critical in this when they are establishing drivers, schedules, right? So you keep them locked in for a 5-year window. It makes more sense. We are, as you can see in the next slide, every time you go to RFP, there's a chance that you generally see a bigger jump than the cost of living, right? Because it's their chance to, obviously it's a business for any provider. The last time we did an RFP, we had 2 options to select, and Brown, just with their history and their rate, was far more advantageous for the city. Okay, so that RFP is based off of the 13,000 hours. What I wanted to show, community in the state has a similar process and a similar rate. So our 2021 rate was 31.26, the state average was 36.82. So we have about the 3rd or 4th lowest rate because we hit procurement at our 2024 rate is 32.04. There are many communities that are going to RFP this coming year. So we can continue to monitor kind of what the state average looks like, but it is anticipated that in 2027, something more in line likely with the state averages. Now, I can't guarantee that, right? It could be less, could be more, but you can see that the range here is pretty wide, and you can see who's providing the services, right? The rate compared to a lot of our peers, but I anticipate that like it did the last RFP. So every year we do a report, and so you can kind of through reviewing this, you can kind of see what, who's using the service, right? Adult, senior, other, and then agency, maybe in that category. In agencies, fares are coming from facilities, right? So if they use transportation. So ultimately, you can see here that 2023, we had $148,000 in share, but the contracted service, was $393,000. So you can kind of see over the 2018, you had a $197,000 difference in 19, 149 in 2020. And you can see now that the past couple years, it's gone to 263 and 244. So why that matters is it's just a larger gap. Approximately 55% of it. So the revenue and the expense are they're getting big rates, right? So increasing rates, we hope to kind of shrink that down, and it just has actually gotten arguably worse than what it was a couple years ago. So those are the numbers in reports. You can see, what we're spending every year in contracted service versus the revenue. So I took these, every year we apply for a grant. For the 6-year period, you can see the local share and you can see what our anticipated contribution is, right? So, going into this program, there's always been a projected local share. And as you can see over a period of time, 2019, right? That share is growing, yes.
And when you say the deficit is growing, it's year upon year upon year.
Correct.
It's not like, so in 2023, we had 54,851. In 2024, we're projected to have 55,335. That's
110.
110?
That's 110,000, yes.
So it's growing each year. It's
Each year.
based, because we lose money, we never recover, and then it just continues to multiply.
Yep. And so basically going back even further, you look at, well, when there was not as big of a deal, right? But as the service has, seen a decline in ridership and an increase in cost and a flat level of shared grant, right, at 55% or so, we've always kept this as a separate fund, and we have never appropriately funded this fund, okay? It has never become in the, library, public safety, public works, parks and rec. There have always should have been a local share budgeted, and we have never done it until this past year's budget where we put the cost share, the operating share, right? And what other communities are struggling with is that they are starting to see costs increase with the cost of their service increasing, because they got a new, well, now their general fund has to push more in, right? We've never pushed any in, and trying to do things like get the service running to an appropriate standard, which is great, but that added to the deficit. Trying to increase the rates to see if it could cover it more didn't really help. So we continue to see the trend of it going deeper and deeper, right? So what we have done now is we've put the taxi in a position, in a budget cycle this past year with everything else. And certainly spending $4,000 to operate a taxi, grown and grown and grown. And it's to the point where we have to begin funding it, because the $60,000 this coming year budget is only going to keep it about where it is. So other communities are dealing with this same thing. I will note that Rhinelander, Wisconsin, they cut their service completely. There have been other communities that have looked at, is that not only are we dealing with kind of the financial, but we're starting in the hole at 300,000, okay? So we have to get that corrected, and it's going to take a lot of resource, and expect 60,000, 60,000, 60,000, because it's just going to become challenging in the budget environment with levy limits and all the restrictions and ability to not, garner more revenue, right? Let alone pay it back, right? So you can see here that we have our current hours, which this is just what we base it off of, and we have our current rates, which is from $7.50 to $10 per hour. That should help a little bit. I've talked over a lot of this with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, who administers 5311 help. And so we have gone down that route and begun looking at certain scenarios to help. As Justin, who knows this better than just about anybody in the state, because it's $1 in, say it's right, versus if you cut an hour, you're only saving 45 cents of that, right, because of the grant. So there's a balance that has to be made, where you don't want to just raise rates, because while that gets you more money, it also may tank your ridership because it's unaffordable, right? You also don't want to cut the service too much, because it's not the necessary rides that are, at times you need, but it's also not saving you as much money because you're getting reimbursed 55%. So there's a balance. So we began looking over, right, what does this look like? And I just provided, make them simple, but these are the current hours, and you're looking at how many drivers there are per hour generally. This information came from Brown Cab. And then, so like looking at this at a very basic level, you know, and this does not get to the 13,000 hours. Based on the 2025 rate of 3204, if we ran a schedule like this and we took in approximately $131,000 worth of fares, we would see a $40,000 deficit, right? If you move to that 13 plus thousand, you're looking at 48 to 50, if not more, $1,000 deficit, right? Okay. So in talking with Brown Cab, we looked over just a few scenarios of, you know, where is there less ridership? And your Friday and Saturday or in the sun, you know, the after 7 o'clock on those nights till 2 in the morning, there's not a lot of ridership. Saves some, right? You go from maybe 40, 50,000 down to 35 to 40,000. So, so you are cutting some. So this is just an option, right? That as service hours to the, you know, next one, not having them blacked out in those areas, right? So we're trying to look at with Brown Cab areas and times that there are not as much ridership, right? We don't want to hit areas that people are really using the service. So those hours were suggested as potential areas for cutting. You could take it obviously a step further and remove like Sunday hours. You could also tag team that with some reduction to actual drivers on the, but the more we cut, the more we have to, you know, work with Brown Cab to ensure that their price remains, you know, feasible to provide the service, right? Because if we cut too many hours and limit that, they're already slim margins. They may say, well, we need to increase our costs, right? So we have to work with them to make some general change a contract that says this is what's expected, right? So this is another option where if you remove certain hours, you could see another reduction. Ultimately, the fare revenue is just sort of a guess projection. It could be more or less, but by removing hours, you can see on like a Sunday, you could take it down to $33,000 or so. But if the overall cost per hour of 30, right? Because you're paying more per hour. So there's a lot of different dynamics that kind of go into this, but generally speaking, these two, where you go from here, where we are today, to kind of here. So we're not proposing right now to eliminate certain hours. These are just examples, but if we were to take an incremental approach to making changes, we would start with some of these scenarios. They're not being used as much. We're seeing a lot more use Monday through Friday in the mornings into the, you know, lunch, afternoon, and then slowing down. So 2025 recommendations, really we have to work with Justin and Brown Cab and their team and look at if there's a proposal to eliminate certain hours. We would need to have our public hearings for those changes and then explore alternative funding options. So if there's any ability to get any dollars the operation through advertising on the side of taxis to whatever. We actually have nice taxis that I hope people would advertise on, and the previous taxis that had 300,000 miles, it's not really great advertising billboard. And many communities are not doing extra stuff, they're just funding it. 2026 is reassess the fare structure and consider potential fare increases. And we have to increase we're going to provide, because that's the fairest and acceptable time for the contractor to give us the price, right? So really, it likely is reducing the amount of hours down, 13,000 to likely somewhere around 9,000. I don't know if that's gonna work or what that looks like quite yet, but we're gonna continue to look at it. And then, based on the outcomes in the service, if we do not see a change, right, in the trajectory of the deficit, or if we reduce the hours and the cost goes up dramatically, we have to be prepared for that. Had to, right? I don't say that lightly. I don't feel that based on the ridership and the numbers and the impact of this service that that's where we want to go. But the reality is the next side of this is what with like the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, on a more recent call with them, there are communities across the state, every one of them listed there, that are like, this is not sustainable, right? When and it used to be, as far as Justin's been doing this way longer than I have, but they used to fund it at say 70% or around that, right? That would be a huge difference compared to 55% at this point. So certainly we'll continue to monitor it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Justin, certainly if you have any thing to add, go ahead.
Well, thank you to the mayor and the council for allowing me one of the best jobs of explaining the situation that the city's in, and I've heard an administrator explain in a long time. So I mean, everything he said was spot on with the conversations we've been having, and the fact that we've seen over the last few years, the reduction in state aid percentages being allocated to these public transit systems, and it's an issue that a lot of cities are working through right now. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer questions also. So I don't know if any from the council or the mayor have any questions specifically that I can tackle.
Elle?
I have a question. I have two questions, actually. First question is, while it's useful to see the number of drivers that we have on staff, I would be interested in seeing the number of folks we serve during those times, this taxi, because I know they do a lot of collective pickups at the grocery store. They'll pick up several people. So I would be interested in knowing the number of people affected.
Oh, are you looking for specific individuals or total ridership counts?
Total ridership count.
Okay, per hour over the course of the total operating hours.
If that can be done, if on a daily basis.
Sure. It can be done. It just takes a little bit of time, and the decision that you're faced with, I think, warrants us putting some time into getting you the data that you're looking for. Taking snapshots in time sometimes is fine for general conversation, but to all the reasons Adam laid out today, I think if you'd be okay with me getting you a very detailed spreadsheet on exactly what you're asking, it may take a couple of days.
Oh, even a couple weeks is fine. But
Sure.
My question is, it was a great report. Those were good spreadsheets, and looking at the number of employees and number of units that you have out on the road. But I think to make a better, more
Sure. Well, and it's always hard to quantify unique individuals, which I know you said isn't exactly what you're asking, but I think that the true reality of shared ride taxi is a bulk of the rider, it's serving a lot of folks. And if the average trip just, in 2023 was 28,883 people or unique trips were provided in 2023, 2024. That's a significant amount of flow.
That's what I'm looking for, because I'll see the van up at Russell Manor collecting people, and then they drop them off at the grocery store, and then a little to have those numbers, because we're being asked to make a pretty significant decision, and it would help to know what the ridership is. And then my follow-up question is actually hearing on this at some point in the future.
Yeah, we don't necessarily need a motion to do a public hearing.
Okay.
We can set a public hearing at a certain date, and when we have a actual increase the fares. So if we come to a conclusion that here is the hours we want to reduce, right? We would then have a public hearing, and there's really nothing right now where it would probably be best, just based on, if Justin and I continue to get some numbers, pull them together, we can provide an update and a formal recommendation based on, what the demographics are. Obviously, I think our approach would be small changes, right? Nothing too dramatic. Have to have a conversation with the council about how that RFP is designed and get your feedback about that. So when that hits the bidding time, there's a whole process that's involved. But I would say that, easily by January, we could have some small changes that maybe help kind of turn some things around. But
Not asking for a ride that has 4 or 5 people in it. I'm asking for the unit count. I hate to use that term for a person, but if you've got a van with 5 people in, that's 5. Thank you.
And we will break it down by total number of people and then also ridership class, because that's an important, very important aspect.
The demographics are important.
Are using it to access essential services that don't have other options for types of transportation, seniors, individuals with disabilities, folks that don't have access to a car to get them to work, to the doctor, grocery store, that sort of thing. So we track all that. We can demographics, and I think that's helpful too.
People that maybe don't have another option for transportation and are accessing essential services such as food or appointments that are needed. So obviously I firmly agree with that. Now, when we look at getting more money, and I believe, so you said you're one of the largest transportation companies in Wisconsin, my guess is either, and let me know where you're at with technology, you have to be looking at it if you haven't already implemented it, for the people that maybe it's not essential, can schedule it in, an appointment. I mean, this is why I for people listening, for people to think that Uber is going to take over, no, they're not going to exist, and it's not going to be viable in a city our size. From the data, our elderly or others that are just technology, I understand that I don't want to force anyone to use technology, but where are you at as far as allowing that for people to use, and then also allow coming up? These are things that I haven't, to be honest, really thought about, but knowing how essential this is, I may start thinking about, perhaps I give a gift to a friend of a gift card of using the taxi service, etc. What is your ability in these areas?
These systems are set up, through the competitive procurement, then the state funding and revenue generation, all that. Every dollar of revenue that our company receives as a result of a transaction on behalf of Ripon, we have to give direct. Credit cards, for instance, we are obligated to pay a credit card processing fee for the transaction. which we can't take out of the cost of the ride because the total cost of the ride has to be credited to do credit card processing, because frankly, in 2024, the fact that we don't seems extremely counter to everything the world we're living in, right? And the reality of it is, and be able to cover the fee of processing, we have to do that on a bid cycle and estimate that we're going to incur $3,000 worth of credit card processing fees over the course of the year, and that has to be built into the hourly rate that we charge. Then you're paying for something in our per hour rate that you don't need to pay for, and when budgets are tight, we don't want to put you in that position.
Can you tell me what could be on the individual using the credit card? I mean, when I go into a store or any place and I purchase, I may say, there's a 3% convenience fee. I mean, that is, I think, pretty much accepted. The people are not questioning. Is there a reason why that couldn't?
There is.
And it wouldn't have to be an hourly rate increase for everybody?
There is, and it's because the city of Ripon sets the exact rate, and we are prohibited from charging a cent more.
Here's the rate. If you don't use a credit card, here's the rate.
The reimbursement back to the provider, though, for us, is where it gets complicated, and I would love to continue that conversation with WSDOT, and if to partner with me on those conversations as a city representative to come forward with those questions. We've offered multiple different opportunities over the years to try to come up with a reasonable solution with the DOT, and they've been receptive to talk. We incur. It eliminates the ability for us to retain the credit card process.
So we would have to talk to the state and see how, frankly, the city would be the one probably processing things, right? Assuming that fee. So I don't know how, it's not that simple. It's just based on, this hasn't obviously evolved with the world based on the regulations that are in place. Justin knows way more about that than I do, right, in terms of how that process plays out, but certainly, I don't know how that would impact things in terms of, even like with water bills, right? We're regulated incurring a bigger deficit by eating that 3%. So we would just have to ensure that the state was comfortable with something. We can continue that conversation with them.
Well, I hate to be so blunt, Justin, let's not continue it now, but I feel like, do you see a scenario, say this is what the currency people are using, and
I agree wholeheartedly with your position, 100%, and that's why it's something that we bring up on a regular basis. You're not the first, but weekly with customers that want to call and buy their grandmother some pass cards for the taxi and pay for them over the phone with a credit card, and we're not able to do that, and so then they have to mail in a check and we mail the coupons. It's a very non-convenient way of doing business. I agree 100% with your position. You're spot on. But just like a few others legislatively set rules in shared ride taxi, it's not easy to overcome, but that doesn't mean we're not diligently trying to do.
And I will say, I think it's a good option. I don't think it necessarily changes the dynamic, right? It's not like having the credit card is going to all of a sudden increase our ridership by 10,000 people, right? It may increase ridership, what is the demographic using it, and are those people going to be using credit cards as well? And I don't think it opens up or unlocks more, an immediate solution for us. I think it's nice to have some things where people can buy things in bulk and get one free or reduced for seniors. So there are things we've done to try to make it more affordable and give them access to, cards, so they're not given $4.50 every.
Next question then would be, as far as, do you do background checks on the drivers? And maybe you don't have to say it now, but I will just say that if that is something you do, I can imagine, especially as a female, advertising, on the website, or we make an announcement, that to ride with, and I think that's a nice selling point.
Mm-hmm. We do criminal background checks. We do driver history background checks. We also are not required to, but do forward as crimes. But if somebody has been in a healthcare facility setting type of employment and had any kind of charges levied against them, you're made aware of them through there. So it's fairly in-depth, the background checks that we
City
provide.
licenses every tax.
I have a question on the SRT service data. Is everyone on this list having problems, or are a few not? Because I noticed that a handful have average, and that would seem to be more efficient, and perhaps they're more stable with their problems. Do we know anything about that? Is it based on anything like that? So if we
Well, in working with other cities, not everybody is experiencing increased local shares for the most part. I mean, it's with the reduction in the funding percentage, and then as Adam talked about, as procurements happen, hourly rates are going up as a result of inflation. Drivers are getting paid more than they were pre-COVID. Cost of vehicles, if they're provided, cost of maintenance, cost of tires, all that are going up. So costs are increasing. Some cities are dealing with they're more willing, I don't want to say willing to make it sound like the city of Ripon, based on my conversations with Adam, is very interested in having a successful continuation of this program. It just has to be affordable. Are shutting the program down. In talking with them, they do have hopes that they can, through budget and working through things, get back into the program at some point, but we'll see. Park and rec programs, everything you're doing is costing more. So just cities are in a position right now, I think, to be more, they're having to look at any greater than last year, but in terms of the quality of service, but the cost of it certainly has increased, and it's been that way for the last few years, and we don't know what the future holds, but some for exactly what they're doing. But I know it's making an impact, and that's why working with the league and the legislators to try to get the funding percentage increased is probably one of the best options to help ensure an affordable public transportation option for the citizens. And without these programs, somebody mentioned Uber a little bit ago, there's not the ride volume for folks to commit to being an Uber driver in some of these rural communities, so they just don't do it. It's been an interesting ride the last few years.
I don't know, Jesse, you may be able to, but the fact that a community stopped the program like Rhinelander is pretty substantial. Have made cuts and done things that we kind of talked about here. But for a community to just say, we're done, it's pretty jarring, frankly.
I think when you get the it helps paint the picture of the need to have some level of service. And that's really up to you all to decide. It's a hard pill to swallow, but the city's subsidizing and the taxpayers are subsidizing, and the city has to decide for it.
This is a question more for Adam. Is there any reason why we're waiting until 2026 to propose any fare increases?
Well, we frankly impact ridership more over the next year when we're kind of still operating this way. Anytime you increase the fare, there's a chance that there's a decline in utilization of the service.
Yeah.
And we did increase that quite a bit more, and it's reimbursed a little differently. So the hope is to kind of spare the rest in the time being, and then look at what level of service is being, or what the pro forma is for revenue based on that, and then make recommendations for potential fare increases with the new contract.
Yeah, I completely understand and agree with, trying to limit changes, especially if we're going to that are utilizing the taxi service clearly. have a reason to utilize it. You know, it's something they need and are using. But you mentioned small changes, and so I was just wondering why, you know, we were going to wait 3 years, because every year, you know, we wait clearly.
Wondering, obviously the taxi ends at 4 in the afternoon, right? 4 in the evening? Is that when it stops running?
No, it's on that chart.
It goes till 2?
No, it goes till 7 every night, Monday through Friday and Saturday, and then Sundays they're done at 4.
Okay. Does the Tavern League kick into
No.
this fund?
No.
Okay, what about the Disabilities Act that they had? Is there a possibility they're disabled through this besides?
Well, I think
That'd be federal funds.
the ADRC in the county kicked in funds to help with reduction of costs for seniors. But in terms of funding outside of this I can't, I'm not familiar with any other
Familiar with any municipalities utilizing any additional grant funding as a result, you know, to help offset the deficit, but the points you made do help offset that to the APRC and things.
I know that the Tavern League does have some sort of app where you can check in with a taxi or get some services that they partner with, and I'm not sure how that works on the back end, if it's a reimbursement or if it's a, you know, a direct contract or something like that. Justin, you may know, but that may or may not have been something that was discussed or looked at.
We always try to work with the Tavern Leagues on their Safe Ride that they've wanted to partner, and we, based on the nature of the grant, we're not allowed to enter into a contract with them because we're entered into a contract with you and we can't do anything. Memorandum of understanding that we'll take their vouchers that the bartender establishment would provide the rider. We collect them and then we'll tally them up at the end of the month, send them a bill, and they pay for those rides. We're happy to do that anywhere that.
Essence saying that's on us to have that conversation with the local Tavern League?
No.
Is that what you were
No,
saying?
no, I believe we are using it there. I was just trying to get into my reports tab, and I believe we are taking safe rides. We do it in virtually every community in the state.
Thanks.
Any further questions or discussion? Thank you, Justin, for joining us. Thank you. Look forward to further conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on then to our last, Adam will give you a brief overview here, but we have two companies that have given us contract proposals.
So I put in your packet a staff report. So basically, since around 2018, we've contracted with Grand Valley for building inspection services. And then earlier this year, we posted the creation of a building inspector position for the city of Ripon, shared with the city of Ripon. We went through that process, had only about 4 applicants, reviewed one with an interview, and just after that concluded it was not in the best interest to proceed with such a limited applicant pool. And Ripon felt the same way. So that remains. It's not a time where we can really do that. You have to have the right candidate, the right credentials, and we just couldn't get there. And I'm usually good to review the procurement of it or to find or solicit other options. So our policies with procurement do state that, you know, contracts of this nature be reviewed. So during that time, we reached out to multiple firms to see if there's any other interest in providing the service, and also reached out to Grand Valley and to see if they were also interested in continuing the service. So after doing that, we received 2 proposals, one from Grand Valley and the other from MSA. Both are in your packets, and both are a little different, but essentially provide the basic services that are required to be provided for building inspection for the city. The key differences that I think will be noted is that the fee structure and payment structure are different between the two, okay? So in Grand Valley's, there wasn't much or approach from the previous contract. Just a couple of areas where there were increases in the hourly rate and a couple increases in the fee structure. The difference, the basic individual writes a check or, pays for a permit, the building inspector receives a share of that, okay? So it's, in the alternative approach, MS for the work they complete, right, on the inspection. So in both cases, the rates would cover the cost and provide revenue for the city, right? The difference is when plan review capabilities, there's just a few differences in approaches there and the level of service that can be provided between the two. And then options for tracking and a review perspective in that we already use MSA for a lot of our plan reviews, and it could become a more streamlined process. Just seeking a motion for either proposal.
I have a question.
John Donnellan.
I'll make a motion to accept the Grand Valley Inspection Services contract.
I'll second.
Motion by John, second by Jonathan. Discussion, Ellen?
I wanted to ask about the issue of code enforcement. I understand the fees and I understand the money and all of that stuff, but the complaints I get as a council person are about the lack of returning calls or returning emails. And so I don't see, I see property maintenance complaints written into Grand Valley, but I'm not missing it somewhere. What are the expectations of this office for code enforcement?
I think that the current expectations are what you see and what you're getting complaints about, and were a reason why we worked toward a full-time inspector, because we just aren't doing enough, and it's falling on city staff to complete, right?
Right, because what I do, when they don't get a call back from several times, they try to make contact, I then refer it to you, and frankly, we're not paying you to do code enforcement. That is not in your job description, and it is not what we pay you to do.
Well, and that's fine, but in MSA's proposal, provide code enforcement related to building inspection as requested. So they would provide the service.
Okay.
Right?
And that includes, and this is what I get pounded on all the time, lighting issues. Everything. It would be.
So there's kind of two levels of code enforcement. I think the police short is in the building compliance part. And so if people have, holes in roofs, or their house needs to be painted, right? That is falling on the police department in a position where they are making judgment calls about things that really aren't and shouldn't be in their lane, right?
Right.
Like, they're not building inspectors. So minimum will minimum will provide both code enforcement and zoning administrative services.
And callbacks to citizens.
I can't speak to, our expectation would be that whoever is hired for this would have exemplary customer service. And if you are hearing that that's not happening currently,
I have no concerns about building permits, that's not an issue. My concern is on the back end and not having the follow-through on enforcing the codes that we have on the books and the not returning phone calls.
Not right now, no.
Okay, Steve.
As far as code enforcement, I've dealt with Sue Leahy through our committees, and she's wondering about codes that people were not following through on. But where does her part stop and the city, not to throw this and say, well, you have such and such a time to do this, and people are not following through? Where does it stop? Where does she, how many letters does she have to send before? Because she, well, not even the police department, that would not be relevant for that. But,
Well, ultimately, they would be cited.
yes.
That would involve
Well, right.
citation. The building inspector has authority to issue cited, and that communication level has been part of the problem, I believe. I have not been directly involved with Sue asking for enforcement action
Okay.
for
Well,
quite
that's
some
where I was.
time. Obviously, I stay in touch with the police department very closely. So I think there's been a breakdown in that area.
Yeah.
For
That's what I
certain. I'm reading her memo now about 2 letters and then turn it over to the city attorney's office. The building inspector has enforcement powers. And they are outside of the city attorney's office. And whether they're directed through the police department is kind of where we've, I guess maybe the buck stops there kind of thing. Turn it over to the city attorney and we're going to issue a citation. The citation comes from a
the
law
police
enforcement
department?
official, either the police department or the building inspector.
All right.
Ellen, then Jillian.
In addition to the constituents I have that have not received service, I had called a few times to get in contact with the current building inspector because I knew that the second level of the fire district did not meet code. It did not meet code. I did not get callbacks. I to have her get a hold of me. And sure enough, when the electrician came up there, we were told to shut it down. It was not usable. It can be used during the day, but it failed the electrician's inspection. It was a fire hazard for a while, and that has been fixed. But as the president of the fire district, when I am calling the building inspector with an issue for a municipal building, I expect a call back. And I didn't get it. I didn't get it until the city administrator asked it to be done.
I feel like a motion was made before I heard a recommendation, unless I missed it, as to what you, like, and maybe that puts you in a tough place, I guess, but I would like to hear what recommendation you have. And then also, I'm assuming we're in this place from my experience with Sue Leahy in helping someone deal with potential bed bugs. She did call me back, and this individual, but because some of the concerns that have been surfaced, we are looking at try to do things better, is my understanding. And we've, unless there's something different in this contract that changes things it feels like it's a question of sticking with what we've already had, and we've heard some concerns, or trying something new. And do you have any plans with the new plan on these? I mean, we have some letters here, but do you have some plans on working with MSA on how this could really serve the city of Ripon? And can you explain more about that? Because you work closely with.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, office, right? And I have to have a working relationship with anybody that this council decides is going to get this contract. So I can't give you a recommendation to potential decisions if I were to give a recommendation. Do I have concerns about communication? Yes. Do I have concerns about my staff and how they interact and what services they're getting from it right now? Of course. Can things be better? Of course. The contract you have in front of you from Grand Valley is the same exact contract as was previously proposed. MSA's contract that can potentially enhance services and streamline processes and use technology that aren't in Grand Valley's proposal, right? But at the end of the day, you know, and my staff will have a working relationship. We have to. So giving a recommendation puts us in a bad spot, and I can't do that.
The specific enhancements you're talking about, if you would like to, I wish there was like a document that said what is specifically an enhancement over the other proposal, but obviously they couldn't read this other proposal, I'm assuming, when they made their proposal. You want to say, Lud, can you remind me, if I had property or if I did work in the city and have, in the future, I plan to specifically need services from the inspector or not need, work with the inspector, how do I have to think about to vote or removing myself from a vote or any type of conflict of interest? Can you remind me, how does that work? If
a pecuniary interest greater than $15,000 is really the baseline. Close relationship that you feel interferes with your ability to cast a vote because of that appearance of impropriety, that is a judgment call on your part. I don't think you have a pecuniary unless you're a contractor regularly working on her on a regular basis, where it's making a difference. The job of a building inspector is to issue permits legally. Should not have a conflict of interest.
Okay, thanks.
Because they're not gaining or losing anything from having the building inspector approve or disapprove. So I don't think that lies with anybody here.
Thanks.
And just to expand on that, as contact the building inspector with a project on our dwelling, and we will have to interact, so every single one of us has the same issue in that regard.
So I'll just add, the enhancements are mostly technology. Zoning administrators, there's multiple inspectors, there's different layers of people to fill in when people are gone. We currently don't have that. GIS tracking, permitting via permit tracking. You know, what we're missing now is enhancements that, for example, I have no idea at this point what permits are out there, right? Building permit. So when we are trying to, as a team, if we do have police out there and they notice somebody, or Public Works notices somebody, right? How easy is it to get that information? Right now, we don't have it, and we're stuck to having to call or follow up, right? When we have processes here that are, boom, it's right at your fingertips, right? Online plan reviews, right? All of this stuff comes into play with MSA that we're currently not getting and is not proposed in the Grand Valley. There's other services as well, including partnering with other entities like e-plan exam, which is kind of getting out there, but state review, we currently defer to the state above 75 or 50,000 cubic feet. We would be able to, with MSA, work with e-plan exam to have those plan exams done quickly within 15 days, and we would review any of those plans. That would all be streamlined into one package under MSA because we already have existing working relationships with them, and we can build those things more easily to streamline them.
That the current agreement with Grand Valley had expired at the end of 2023, and it's now coming up on maybe a year or just past a year without a working contract with Grand Valley, which, I mean, it's good that you are able to run a working relationship with someone without a contract, but it is concerning to come to meet or go to renew a contract at some time earlier. So that was just a note that I wanted to bring attention.
I will note that Adam did request a contract earlier in the year, and Doug.
I have a question here. With Grand Valley, they just sue. With MSA, potentially, how many people could be working at the city at one time? Would that vary if there's a big project going on?
Lead inspector. She would take on the community first and work to get everything set up. And then, you know, like most companies, they kind of assign someone to it eventually, or they have someone overseeing it, but they always have backup. So there's basically. So we would just likely get Stephanie or Steve is the other individual in the packet.
Okay, so about how many hours a week then, 20?
It's just dependent on the workload. So, I mean,
on the workload.
Depends on what we expect. We would have office hours. That's a part of theirs. So there'd be that. And then, you know, generally speaking, how they bill and how they are accountable is doing the inspections, right? So if they're out there for 3 hours during the day, they track those through all of their permitting. They all of it filed, and it's billed out then. And that, you know, that's just the difference from how we do it now.
Okay, so they're asking for what, $100,000 a year to do this? Is that going to come from the fees?
Yeah, and that's just an estimate based on the current permit revenue.
Okay.
Right now, through this year, sorry, 1 second here. We have, that's just an estimate based on the general, you know, what they expect, right? That's not what is guaranteed by any means, and
So they're billing per hour on everything?
so if year to date, yes, versus year to date, right? Grand Valley has been paid $100,392.12 by the city of Ripon. And that don't have a report as to hours, inspections, anything beyond that, right? There's just, here's the permit, pay it, what is our percentage, right? And we.
Thank you.
John.
With MSA, they have office hours. They will bill for office hours, correct?
Yeah, it's an hourly rate.
Right, where Grand Valley has, their rate is based on permits issued. So if we bottom line the office hours, and you look at Sue Leahy's at Grand for MSA, and I don't even think there's one that starts at 60. Everything is about 85 an hour.
And I agree with you until you start looking at the permit revenue and the share of that, right? Sue Leahy has been paid over $100,000, right?
We've had a big year.
Yep.
Boys and Girls Club is
70
how many millions?
78,000 the year
Ripon
before, 46 the year before. We have had big years, right?
Right.
And we gain in those years by some of this, right?
Yeah, you're getting.
To think that it's just $60 an hour, that if you boiled it down to a per hour revenue at $100,000, it's likely more than $60 an hour, right? For it, but you are in the permit. So you're not getting billed for it. We can control that. But to think that she's just charging $60 an hour or nothing is false, because it's $100,000. And we're not getting 40 hours a week.
No.
Right?
No.
So
it's still based on percentage, and if you have a bad year, we're not going to, every year it won't be a Boys and Girls Club and a Ripon College expansion. You're going to have 6 homes at $3,000 a permit or whatever, and various other.
Mark?
So if the inspector is getting paid per permit issued, does that make anyone else seem a little uncomfortable in that the permits may be given when they shouldn't be? Now, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I'm just, it makes me question if there's not an incentive there that would be considered a perverse incentive, which is you're being incentivized to just push things out the door. And I'm not saying that's happening. Inherently cause a conflict, or does it not? And maybe this is a whole question, and maybe this is out of bounds, but that just.
I think that's a less likely scenario to what is more likely is price has been paid. There's less incentive to do a thorough follow through on the inspections because the inspector's already been paid. The question is the inspection thorough and detailed and making sure that everything is indeed up to code? I'm not saying that the inspections are not thorough, but I think that is a more likely abuse than just writing permits that aren't required.
And once a permit is issued, then the check is cleared, so to speak, and
right.
The accountability. I'm not a building inspector, I'm not a plumber or a contractor. I have no knowledge or, ability to judge that, but once it's issued, it's been issued and it's been cleared.
Yeah.
There's a number of cities that operate in a similar format, just so it isn't.
Okay, so it's
like
not,
Ripon
it's
is
not out of the,
out on the island here. There's a number of communities.
I just heard that, and it's
no, and it's a legitimate concern.
And I'm not saying that there is abuse. I'm saying that is a more likely way to abuse it.
Understood.
John, then.
$100,000. But going to what Mark is saying, not all inspections are done by Grand Valley Inspection Services Sue Leahy. She may not be certified for inspection. Who has his integrity, his name on the line, inspects it, does the paperwork. And yes, it goes under Grand Valley Inspection Services, but it's not actually her always doing it. So I don't think your point would be, it's a good question, but I don't think it would be valid that she's pushing it out the door quickly.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, that, I didn't really know. Again, I'm not a building inspector, so yeah, it makes sense that if you're not.
To hire somebody to do it, yes.
Doug?
Yeah, my question is, if MSA has all of these master plumbers and stuff, so they would just have them come in and check out master plumbing, correct? We don't need to hire anybody, we've hired MSA to do all that.
They would provide the same our designated agent for DSPS and plan reviews, and would have their team of plumbers or, of engineers, right, to review things and do inspections. So they're equal.
Okay, well, that's what I thought. And if we're estimating that they would cost us around $100,000, that would be permit fees that would probably pay for all of that. Get 40 or 50,000, correct? The same way with Grand Valley, correct?
Correct. It's
kind of a wash no matter what you look at.
yeah.
Ellen?
Call the question.
Ellen?
Earlier, you had mentioned that this could help police, and because we do have our police chief here, you don't have to come up. But if there is something you want to say related to public safety, having the database, is this something that potentially could help public safety? Is there anything to add to this conversation?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
John, did you have?
I did have another question, I forgot. What is, I don't see their fee for MSA for code enforcement. How would that fall in?
Based on the individual doing the code enforcement.
So if it's
Hourly rate.
Okay.
An hourly rate controlled by however many hours we ask them to do.
So if it's an architect that's needed, it would be like a $85 or $80 per hour. Okay, just again, Grand Valley is at 60 for things like that.
Grand Valley proposal and contract. Any last discussion on that motion?
I do want to say, we're talking about these two companies and from what I've seen, I'm a retired electrician, so I've been in the field a long time. It's extremely important to get inspections right. And since I've been on the council, MSA, they've been here doing a lot of things. I don't remember them doing anything close or remote that we weren't happy with. A very professional company, and we're talking, I don't understand why we wouldn't go with MSA over this. I don't believe Grand Valley deserves to be renewed. There's just been too many problems.
I get a number of the problems that were reported?
What's that?
How many problems were reported?
I don't know. I'm just hearing that there are problems.
Okay.
So the motion is to accept the Grand Valley proposal and contract. Have roll call, please.
Iverson.
No.
Schatzinger.
No.
Reamer.
Yes.
Gallops.
No.
Dunkert.
No.
Gotsky.
Yes.
Sorensen.
No.
Split.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Are there any other motions on this topic?
I'd like to make a motion to accept MSA.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion's by Doug, seconded by Dave. Any further discussion on the topic? One last time, any further discussion on this motion?
Forget it. I got some comments, but I won't say them.
All right, we'll take a roll call on the motion to accept the MSA proposal for building inspection services. Adam?
Iverson.
Yes.
Schatzinger.
Yes.
Reamer.
Yes.
Gallops,
Yes.
Dankert,
Yes.
Gotsky,
No.
Sorensen.
On, project updates and staff reports. Looking for PD, Public Works.
Leaf collection continues. We are down one truck. It's going to be out of service. Just repeated mechanical issues with one of the leaf vacuums.
Is that with the vacuum or the plow itself?
The front attachment, the motor is having some difficulties.
So the truck will work as a plow?
The truck is fine, yes.
Okay.
It's the actual vacuum itself. So we will work on trying to diagnose what or if what can be done with it before next season. But in the meantime, we will continue with the two remaining vacuums into next week.
Very good, thank you.
We've got some information online regarding that. We were required by the EPA to do an inventory by the end of last month and then send out letters to individuals, property owners that we know have confirmed lead service lines that have, and there's no immediate threat, right? And we have a form online that if people can find out what their line is made out of, they can self-report and help us along the way. The community in the state had to do this, and it was a letter that was drafted by the EPA that we had to send out, so we couldn't change it. So it was far more kind of scary. Certainly we have lead out there is confused or has any questions, they can contact us, go online, email the water department. The information is out there, okay?
Could we have the city just kind of keep reminding people, maybe for, say, a couple weeks, this line self-reporting link, just so that it's out there for people that may have questions or concerns.
We can do a follow-up, yep.
Thank you.
Do you know, it was recommended in the letter that, different best way then to ensure it, or could someone perhaps have their plumber or look at the actual, can you visually test for this? Do you know?
Yeah, there's information online. It's magnetism. If it doesn't, like,
What
I
you're
know,
saying
but
is
that's.
online is more than the letter?
Yes,
Okay.
that is what we were required to
Got
do. Certainly, someone can go get a water test if they're concerned about it, right? But there is also an active, if there's no more questions with that, but we will continue to try to get public education out because it's not going to go away. The Senior Center Director, Christine Loish, we thank her for her time with us. She got a full-time job at a local senior care facility, so we keep losing people to that, so we are applying or having that position open. So thank you, Christine. But the Senior Center Director position is currently, we're accepting applicants, so if there's anybody interested, have them apply. That's all I have.
Thank you, Adam. All right, so I will start mine with some appointments. First one is actually a reappointment. I would like to reappoint Ron Silber to the Historic Preservation Commission.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Motion by John, second by Ellen. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving Ron Silber's reappointment to the Historic Preservation Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's approved, thank you. Next one is a new appointment to Zoning Board of Appeals. This would be Doug Pepler for a 3-year term.
I'll make a motion to approve Doug Pepler to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I'll second it.
Motion by John, second by Doug. Any discussion here? All those in favor of approving Doug Pepler to Zoning Board of Appeals, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And last one is Luke Dretsky to Plan Commission for a 3-year appointment.
I move to approve Luke Dretsky to the,
Discussion on that one?
I knew Luke when he was a student at Ripon College. He was a great student, and I know he wants to get involved in the community. He recently moved back, so I think it's a great appointment.
Anyone else? The Plan Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved as well. And then my only other communications are to wish everyone in the room and at home a happy Thanksgiving. Hope you have a good weekend with. Hearing none, at this time I will seek a motion to adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin State Statute 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of require a closed session. This would be to discuss an amendment to a development agreement with Sanmar Properties LLC and the Sanmar Lot Sale Program.